I was thinking about the story of Jericho, and that's in Joshua chapter 6 in the Bible. It says that the children of Israel were trying to invade this city, and the city had tall walls, and they were secure. So God had told them to march around the city every day for 7 days. And then on the seventh day, they were told to march around the city 7 times in a single day. And it was on that 7th day, after they marched 7 final times around Jericho, that the walls came crumbling down and the armies were able to go in and raise the city. And then there's another part of the story where Rahab, who was a prostitute, had harbored and helped the spies. And she'd been faithful to this group before they invaded the city. And so even though no one in the city was spared, her life and family were protected because she had been faithful before there was ever any hope or chance that the team would be able to get in. And I was thinking about how sometimes we want a breakthrough of some kind in our life. And there's this poetry of 7 in many allegories and Bible stories and things like that. 7 represents a state of wholeness or perfection. And there's this period of going through various stages of finding yourself, of doing things that you need to do to work on yourself. And it can be a long journey to get from where you begin to where you're ultimately going. It can feel like it should go faster than it is going, because you need to learn various things along the way. And if you don't, then you're not ready. So patience is important. Patience to work on who you are. And sometimes that takes longer than we think it should. I think about my life, and I think about all of the things I've gone through, and I think about, wouldn't it be nice if somehow I could have learned those lessons that I took years to learn years earlier. But that's not really how life works. It's going through all of those things that we have to grow through, which puts us in a place where we're finally able to get to that 7th day, when it's going to be the time when victory is delivered to us. And when you think about this Jericho story, well, the walls were impenetrable. And outside of faith of some kind, there really was no reason to believe that it was going to be possible for this small group of underpowered warriors to get in and overcome an established city. It was not like they had a chance. It was only faith that could have given them a chance. And then there was Rahab, this prostitute, the outcast, the one that nobody would look at and say, well, this is someone worthy of being spared. This isn't, you know, a morally upstanding, high status kind of a person, right? But she was spared in the end, because when the underdogs didn't have any apparent chance in the world, she was there to harbor them and help them and be their allies on the inside. And so her life and family were spared when all of the others were cast down. And I think about how when we go through these phases and times of our life where we have growing to do, there's people who won't believe in us. There's people who will always be trying to push their agenda. There will be people who are trying to manipulate us for their own purposes. And even if they act like they're well-meaning, ultimately the only reason they're invested in our lives is because they think that they stand to get something out of it. And those people aren't worthy of keeping in your life. When the gates and the walls come crashing down and the barriers are eliminated and you have the opportunity to move on to the next phase in your life, those people who wanted to lead from a perspective of control instead of service, those people are not going to be people that you keep around, because they weren't actually there to serve something greater than themselves when you weren't doing well. So when you are doing well, then at that point, it's kind of like that other Bible verse where Jesus says, you know, you were there to give me drink, and you were there to clothe me when I was hungry and naked. And the followers will say, well, when did we see you hungry and naked, and when did we serve you? And he says, when you did it to the least of these my brethren, you did it unto me. And it's just, I think it's interesting how people will marginalize others without even really intending to. But then when the seemingly unlikely becomes reality, when the walls come down, then they act like they wanted to be your friend all along. But they really didn't, because they rooted against you when things didn't seem like they were going your way. And so it's important to focus on investing in the people who actually believe in you, the people who actually demonstrate a spirit of service regardless of what season you're in. And the truth is, if you have to ask whether people's motives are right, they probably aren't. Because when people care, it's self-evident, and it shows. But going back to the Jericho story, I was thinking about this notion of having to walk around the city once a day, and that's kind of like the allegory of working on yourself, going through different stages toward wholeness in your life. But then there was that seventh day when they were closest to the breakthrough. And God told them in that day, you have to walk around the city 7 times. In one day, you have to walk around the city 7 times. And I thought that was really interesting. Because imagine each day they walked around the city once, but on the 7th day, when they were closest to the breakthrough, they had to walk around it 7 times in a single day. And, you know, I was walking around the Walmart home office here, you know, and as you guys know, I've been looking for work, moved into town, walked away from everything, relocated here to Arkansas, been applying for different jobs and thinking about, you know, what does the future hold for me? And now this week is the 2nd week of being relocated in Arkansas and thinking about, you know, what does the future hold? And then there's that moment of feeling kind of maybe stuck, feeling like, things aren't moving as fast as I would like. I can't rush it, right? And it occurred to me as I was walking around the campus this evening, because I can walk around the home office campus easily from my apartment where I live. It's very close. And I was thinking about, it's crazy to be so close and yet so far, to be able to look in the windows and see the place that I traveled, 1,500 miles to potentially try to work for. And yet I can't really break in. I have to be at the mercy of, seeing whether I can be offered or invited in, right? But I thought about how the Israelites had to walk around the city of Jericho so many times. 7 times they walked around the city. And then there was that final moment when the walls came down. And sometimes in life, we have to walk around the city 7 times. Sometimes we get to the place where we're ready to move on, but the final test is that we have to continue to be patient, so, if you will, so that God can work on his own timing, instead of us expecting that things are going to work out on a basis of our timeline. And as you guys know, probably I'm an agnostic. I'm not a religious person. So it might seem strange that I evoke so much references to religious things. But I think that no matter what your perspective is, the truth is that there is plenty of room in life for providence to guide our paths. And God is just a word for that great esoteric sum of all things, which binds us together and adds cohesion to this story which we call life. There's room for faith as much as there's room for the unknown. And there's far more that we don't know than there is that we do. But believing that there is hope and purpose and faith to guide us through all of that unknown, believing that it all is part of a story that's meant to make sense, but maybe not on the front side, and to trust that it's going to be something we understand better by and by. I think that that makes a lot of sense, and it is a great segue into peace. But sometimes it can be hard to know what you need to do next. Sometimes it can feel like you followed a path of faith to a certain place, and then you say, well, what next? What am I supposed to do now? And that's okay. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to give yourself rest, to give yourself a space to breathe, to accept the fact that life doesn't necessarily need to move forward faster than it is. And if you do find yourself in a place where you're kind of in between, that's okay. Because the other thing that's been on my mind is that there's a time when the walls do come down, when the breakthroughs do come, when the next chapter does begin, and then life gets busy. And you don't have time for yourself in the way that you used to. You don't have time for silence in the way that you used to. Because then instead of investing more and more in yourself, you're investing more and more in service to something greater than yourself. So I think it's important to cherish the quiet moments when there's room and time for introspection. And it's also important, just like the harlot Rahab was saved in the story of Jericho, it's important to remember who really is there for you, who really cares, and who really is faithful when they don't need to be. Because the people who are faithful to you the people who are great ambassadors, the people who are beacons of light when you need it. Those are the people that you should continue to hang on to. It's the people who are there for you in the lean season that you want to take with you when you finally break through into a season of abundance. As always, good luck on your adventure. Till next time, thanks so much.